Join us on Hat of Many Things as we discuss why Sportsball is so great.
Hello, welcome to the Hat of Many Things. After a mild house-moving hiatus, I am settled in my new quarters in my office, and I am joined with my compatriot,
Tom.
Joining us today, we also have Rob, who you may know from our Unparliamentary Language podcast or previous episodes of the Hat of Many Things, where he has guested on political matters.
Hello.
And Dave, who actually knows about sport.
Hello.
That was something.
That was Dave.
That was not safe for work.
There's all these ASMR people being like, oh, that was so good.
So, today we're going to be talking about sports, and more sports. Usually ones involving balls, sometimes ones involving fists. In my opinion, it's not a sport unless one large man is smashing another large man into the floor. Football, not a sport. Darts, not a sport. Rugby, sport.
Would sex be a sport by your boundaries? It would be classed as a sport.
I mean, you can certainly be sporting during sex, and you can definitely avoid balls, even a bank if you so inclined. So, Rob, you know about politics. Dave, you know about sports. What do they have in common?
Lots of people like to shout differing opinions at each other.
Tribalism is a massive thing.
And politics would be better if it had a referee.
Certainly, you've got Burko. You've got a man shouting, "Order! Order!"
Maybe refs should start running around the pitches. Order! Order! Whenever footballers start scrapping or shouting, order!
Yeah.
I was going to say they both tend to play on nationalistic tendencies during certain events. We have a World Cup this year, and what brings out nationalism like a World Cup?
Or anything else that will increase beer sales.
Yeah.
Or the throwing of beer over people. I think back to the 2018 World Cup and the amount of beer that was wasted during goal celebrations.
I'm sorry. The World Cup was in 2015 and is occurring again in 2019. I don't know what you're talking about. The World Cup happens this year, and it happened in 2015, and nothing really happened in between except some little thing called the Olympics.
Wait a second. Can I just say, to bring out these nationalistic tendencies again, you're Welsh? Am I?
I am of English
correct?
and
Or
Welsh
you support
heritage,
Wales during,
which means I, of course, support the team that isn't England.
Okay. Which is why you don't believe in the World Cup.
I just don't believe in it because the World Cup only
because
happens for sports, and football is
Is
really
that
just amateur theatre.
It's
just...
Oh, you're killing me.
It's just amateur dramatics. It's people falling.
This is why we got you on, Rob.
Genuinely putting on a bit of a show. But there's not really any sport going on. Except in the Women's Football World Cup. They tend to actually play some football.
They play some great stuff. I remember one of my darkest moments was staying up until 2 a.m. to watch the Women's World Cup and see England go out to a 120th minute own goal. It was a very lonely time in my life.
To be fair, how much more English could you be to go out on an own goal?
Oh, it was incredible. Being English and supporting them in any sport is just full of disappointment, and it's the way I like to live my life.
But we'll just swing it back. We were normally starting with a definition. Tom, what is the definition of sport?
So, as usual, we've gone to Wikipedia, the source of all our definitions. Sport includes all forms of competitive physical activity or games which, though casual or organised participation, aim to use, maintain or improve physical ability and skills while providing enjoyment to participants, and in some cases, entertainment for spectators. That's quite a mouthful. Also, I'd like to note that the next sentence just starts off with hundreds of sports exist, which, that's probably true.
Well, now that Tom's part in the show is concluded, we can carry on. We have some examples. We will start by rolling back to soccer ball. Are we fans of soccer ball?
Yes.
It depends, in the sense that I cannot stand watching it on TV. However, I am a season ticket holder at Oldham. So I do hate myself enough to follow 4th Division.
What's your team called again, Dave?
Oldham Athletic.
Bit of a misnomer, isn't it? Putting the word Oldham and Athletic
really
together.
Not at the minute. Exactly.
So, I mean, I'm sure that we could have some interesting comparisons between Division 4 football and the Premiership. Have you both been to games in your respective divisions?
Yes.
Yes, I have as well. I support Coventry City, so I've seen them in the Championship. in League One and in League Two as we slowly got worse and worse over time.
I'm not going to lie, my surprise is that Coventry is a city.
They've got a cathedral. In fact, they got two because one got destroyed.
Oh, we've got a chant. We've got a football chant about having two cathedrals.
Well, now you have to chant it.
My interest is piqued.
In our Coventry homes, we speak with an accent exceedingly rare. You want a cathedral, we've got one to spare. In our Coventry homes. That's an
Dave,
actual chant.
What's an
Amazing.
Oldham athletic chant?
Unless it's about sausage rolls, I can't really think too much of one. If I'm brutally honest, there are at least one that doesn't involve lots of swearing.
That's a lot.
Which seem to happen. Yeah. So apart from not having lots of swearing, which I'm trying to be nice and clean, which doesn't always happen.
So what makes soccer ball a good sport? Why should Tom watch soccer ball?
I will just interject to say I have seen some football/soccer ball before, and I have seen some live games, but I don't.
Start with why you don't watch it then. Why don't you watch soccer ball, Tom?
I mean, so I think probably my main reason for it is I just don't find it particularly interesting to watch. Like, I understand all the rules. People say, the offside rule is hard to understand. It's not.
You have to be an idiot to fail to
understand. It has changed, yeah. It has changed at various points for various reasons, and maybe that confused people at the time, but... No, I never really found it that interesting to watch. I think it's a thing that's much more interesting to play.
Yeah, it's a fun game to have a kick about. I don't mind having a kick about, but you would have to pay me to sit and watch a game of football.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the thing I would always say, so my dad's actual team is Man United, but because of my grandma, we also have Lincoln City as a team in our family. We got taken to see a Lincoln City game, and I think it was a 5-2 win to Lincoln City. And the problem is all other football games I've seen since have been less exciting than that. That's a scoreline you don't see in football very often. And I think that's probably the thing that I find least interesting. Like, we'll get to rugby, but other games have more scoring and more points. And that, I'm a simple human. I just like to see big numbers go up.
You see, that's a counterpoint to why I think football is so good, because in other sports, if a team is better than the other, they tend to win like 99 times out of 100. If you've got New Zealand against like Georgia in the rugby, like they would win all the time. But football, because it's such a low-scoring game, there's like a greater chance of upsets. The narrative isn't always set, and I think it's one of those sports where you really can bet on an underdog. Like Leicester City winning the title was a 500 to 1 shot at the start, but they were able to do it. I don't think many other sports can say that they've had such an underdog story or an unexpected win throughout their history. So that's one of the reasons I think football is like so accessible and so much more
Fiji knocking
exciting
Wales out
than other games.
Japan beating South Africa in a Rugby World Cup.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying that it never happens. I'm just saying that upsets in football are far more likely. Man United can go to Stoke and lose unexpectedly on a Wednesday night, and that tends to happen a lot more throughout the season than it will do with the odd test or the odd game in a World Cup.
Okay, so you like that it's low scoring because it introduces a greater element of unpredictability.
Yeah, precisely.
Okay, Dave, what is it you like and dislike about soccer ball? I'm not calling it football. It's far too fun to say soccer ball. It's going to make so many people so angry.
No, to be fair, soccer suits me down to the ground.
Oh, it does, because
we'll get to that in a little bit.
What's the USA version of a weeb?
I have got no idea.
You're like,
but it's probably
you're like
me.
a plastic yank, aren't you?
Hey, I lived in Texas. That counts for a little bit. But no, for me, with good old soccer ball, my love of it is actually the atmosphere that you get on the day. But I suppose you do get it in a lot of sports as well. Now, the annoying thing is about playing in a lower league and only having, say, 4,000 or 5,000 people there rather than what you'd see in the tens of thousands in the higher leagues, is that during home games, you tend to sit there and not do too much because everyone's so spread out. But the away game atmospheres that go when you can take, 2,000 to 3,000 people to
those are the ones
games,
where you start a fight, right?
No, those are the ones that everyone's just there together and enjoying what it is that's there and just chanting and having fun as they go through. So take, for instance, going to Fulham and taking 4,000 people in the FA Cup, taking the same amount of people and pretty much having almost the same number as fans as Doncaster in the following round that would happen. But it's not just a matter of, the FA Cup and playing those bigger ties. It's particularly with Oldham itself being quite a community-based club. is that you don't tend to see a big fall off of people that go home to people that go away. We fill out stands wherever we go and we have a laugh enjoying it, whatever we're doing it. But the problem is we don't then get more home fans there to replicate that atmosphere. So for me, it's the trips away and just having a good time with people that you might not necessarily see outside of football. But it's having that camaraderie and just generally acting like the lads that really is quite fun.
So there is, of course, the elephant in the room with football in particular in the UK, which is wankers. And you get them with every sport, right? But it's really apparent in football compared to any other sport in the UK, simply because of the difference in popularity. And like, I'm sure it isn't, but it could well be the same percentage of like hooligans and violent and like people causing trouble in football crowds as is in any other crowd. But because the crowd's so much bigger, the percentage creates a greater number and therefore a greater effect. So it could be literally no worse than any other sport in terms of percentage of fans. Just by virtue of having more fans, it becomes more visible. But it never feels like it, does it? Like wherever you go in Manchester on a football day, there's trouble all over the city. There's people causing arguments, fights. I mean, people get way drunker at rugby games. Like way more beer is sold at rugby games statistically. But there's just less violence and trouble. And maybe it's just due to less fans total, so smaller percentage of fans willing to cause trouble. But what is it about the culture in football that stems this kind of undesirable behaviour?
I think personally, if you don't mind me jumping in there, Rob, I think personally it's to do with how condensed you've got so many, at the end of the day, big sports clubs. If you take rugby, for instance, how many are in the English Premiership right now for rugby? How many teams? How many clubs?
I'll Google it because I don't watch the Premiership. I watch the Pro 14.
Take that for instance. So there's 12 teams and that's across England. So you've got 12 teams across England that, you can gain rivalries as you go, but it's never going to be a local rivalry.
Yeah, I mean,
whereas
you take out here. So it's Newcastle, Wasps, Leicester, Worcester, Northampton, Gloucester, Bristol, Bath, Exeter, and then Saracens and Harlequins are like in or around.
Yes. So the majority of teams at rugby, you'll have, if you follow rugby, you'll have that team that you grew up near, which will be the one that you follow. Because of how condensed you've got 92 professional teams. It's probably more than that. You've got a lot of professional teams in England that follow football, that you're naturally going to have that condensed amount of teams. You can grow up on a street in the middle of the rough parts of Manchester and have people that follow Man United, or the people that follow Man City, or the people that even follow Liverpool, or even follow Blackburn when they were higher up. Yes, there's 20 teams in the Premier League, but then you still got 4 top Premier League divisions. So there's a lot more condensed aspects and a lot more passion, really, when it... Well, not passion as such. You're almost on top of each other when it comes to who it is that you're growing up with, who it is...
And you think that causes more friction?
Yeah, because you're always going to end up bumping into people that follow different teams. Now, it's not an excuse for it, but you always have those pockets of fans that are escalated a little bit more. And I feel like, it has been shown a lot more, and it was a lot more prevalent in the 80s. But, with films like Green Street, only kind of highlights it within the mainstream aspect of current times. But you'll always have those tiny pockets of fans that will become violent, and I think a lot of it is to do with the fact that there's so many professional teams pretty much on top of each other.
Okay, that is an argument for it. Have you got any thoughts?
Yeah, I've got two. My first one is that culturally, football is one of the only sports that separates its home fans and its away fans. So in rugby, you mix together. In cricket, you mix together. In tennis, it doesn't matter who you're supporting. Everybody's there together, and even just that feeling of knowing you might be near an away fan or mingling makes that person more human, makes you less likely to be a bit of a dick during a game. I know certainly when I've gone to see Bath Rugby a lot, you know that you've got Exeter fans next to you and you realise they're a human being and you can get on with them. Meanwhile, I've been at Coventry versus Stoke and had the away fans start to charge at me. because things were getting a bit heated during the game. And it's the fact that it sort of makes that tribalistic feeling, makes you feel like, you're at war with this other team, that's unique to football and creates that kind of like high stakes feeling.
Yeah, but do you know when that started?
I mean, to be honest, I don't, and I would say that it's
because I would suspect that started as a result of tribalism and violence, rather than tribalism and violence started as a result of segregation.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to say is that football is the only sport that's reinforced that culture throughout. Every other sport tries to make the opposition fans more human and mingle together. Football is the only one that.
Okay, whereas American football is simply segregated by
pretty much, yeah.
Exactly. Unless you watch The Alliance, but we'll go about that in a bit.
Yeah, we do have that listed. Okay, so I'm a huge rugby fan. I think that's apparently obvious. So it is listed on our list as number 2. It is hand egg. Hand egg involves large men smashing into each other in the field whilst passing an odd-shaped ball backwards, never backwards and forwards, only backwards, occasionally kicking it forwards, and attempting to cross a line on the ground. It's extremely physical. It requires a lot of teamwork, as do most sports. I prefer it to football for a couple of reasons. I mean, the first is simply bias. I grew up playing it, and there is a culture very much in rugby of looking down on football. Mostly because rugby tends to pride itself very much on respect as a part of the game, respect and integrity. For example, the captain can approach the referee to speak, so you don't get any shouting or swearing at the ref. Players are sin bin for a yellow card instead of just having a warning. It's stricter, but it has to be stricter because there is a higher risk of serious injury. There is a risk of serious injury in football, but it's less common and it's less frequent. It's just not a contact sport, and players aren't as large or strong. They don't weigh as much. It just makes sense that you have to be stricter. And as a result, it breeds this culture of respect that its players and fans often feel that football lacks. I personally, my major gripe with football is I feel like the players tend to be extremely arrogant and entitled. They don't tend to, I feel, respect the jersey they're wearing, the fans that are cheering for them, or the referee on the pitch, or even the rules. That's my gripe with the diving, with a lot of the falling over and milking for penalties, is I feel like they're not respecting the rules of their own game. But I do acknowledge it also as a non-contact sport. They may simply be trying to draw attention to what they perceive as a breach of the rules, but I do feel like there is way too much diving, isn't there?
Yes, there is.
Yes.
How do you? It needs stamping out for me to even have a chance of respecting that game, because I don't respect the people playing it. Because if they don't respect the game they're playing, why would I? But I do respect the people who enjoy it. I just don't always understand it. I also find it very slow, which is interesting, because my housemate finds rugby too slow and I find football too slow. Because to me, football is 90 minutes of jogging. It's literally just 90 minutes of jogging. Nothing happens. Occasionally there's 15 to 30 seconds of someone sprinting near a goal and taking a shot. Those moments are exciting. Those moments are exciting, but some games you only get 4 of them. Just nothing happens. It's just jogging. I may as well be watching a marathon.
Comparing it to rugby, I'm a massive rugby fan as well. My dad played a lot of rugby, and so I've got great respect for both games. But with rugby, it's a very stop-start game. When you get a scrum, you can just watch your phone for 5 minutes while touch, pause, engage. No, sorry lads, that one collapsed again, we'll reset it. You can get moments like that in rugby that slow the game down, and it's a game of phases.
You can, but they're not that common.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the Six Nations. This year has been tremendously exciting because a lot of teams have been playing a kicking, expansive game and really trying to send it to the opposition. Meanwhile, in previous years, I think the England team of 2003 was a very sort of turgid forward side,
yes,
that just based on just kicking the ball and winning by attrition,
and then it would create opportunities for its backs.
So it's
I do understand the argument against rugby is that it's quite stop-start, because the same argument can be applied to a greater magnitude for American football. But one thing I do enjoy about rugby sometimes is when you say it's in phases, set piece phases can slow the game down a lot, sure. But when you've got one team trying to smash it over the line for 10-15 minutes, and you're waiting for one of the two teams to give away a penalty, or you're waiting for the one mistake or the turnover, to me that is thrilling. That's some of my favourite moments of rugby. It's not just the bursts for the tries, the long runs, or the clean breaks. It's that edge of your seat tension that you get from that extended, smashing.
So I think one thing we mentioned earlier is that when you're watching rugby, you tend to mix the fan base. So, for example, I went to Twickenham and saw England v Wales as a friendly, and I was mostly surrounded by Welsh people, and that just wouldn't seem tenable at a football match, whereas in rugby it was. And I think maybe that adds to the tension, because you get the feeling from both sides. It's not just you wanting one thing, but like when something goes slightly against you, and you're like, oh, and then those people on the other side, yeah, they're delighted. So you get that kind of more of that play back and forth within the crowd watching. And I think I'd echo what you said. Like, out of all of the sports we're going to talk about, rugby is the one. While I don't follow it on a week by week basis, I do my best to watch Six Nations, and the World Cup for rugby, and it's the one I've seen most live and with friends, like in a pub. And you really do feel that tension in a way that I don't think I do with football. And I think it's just because I feel more invested in it, because I not that I don't like. I understand what's going on in football, but I think I probably agree with you. It just looks like a lot of running, and occasionally something interesting happens. Whereas I feel like from moment to moment, rugby has more interest for me.
Yeah, like Rob, you say you can look away from your phone for 5 minutes in rugby. I can't look away for a minute because I miss something.
Well, I look away at the scrum. That's what I'm saying. The scrum is the boring part. Once the scrum's over, I'll look at it.
No, see, I used to be in a scrum, so I'm looking for the mistakes in the scrum. I'm looking to see who's wheeling, who's going to get penalised, who dips. I'm looking to see where the scrum half is positioned, and where the backs are positioned. Like, how deep is the line? Where are the mismatches? Where are the gaps? Are they going to go left? Are they going to go right? You can judge based on the position of the field, players on the field. So that might just be a difference in knowledge of the game, in the same way that people who enjoy football more are going to see more than just a couple of people jogging. They're going to say, well, this person's positioned here and this person's positioned here, in order to create a barrier between these two people should they attempt to pass.
Yeah, certainly.
It's the only way I ever really managed to enjoy some football was when Wales were in the Euros. I did start watching it, and I just sort of went, oh, I guess it's more like chess than athletics. It's just like, oh, let's just move this piece to D4.
It's funny you should mention Welsh in the Euros, because I was going to say about, you were talking about the slow build up in rugby too, like the 15 minutes of pressure on a line that gets you that try, and there's sort of a burst of relief of, this, you're glad that they've scored, but it's kind of a subdued reaction because you knew it was coming. I just wanted to compare it to this sort of like outburst of joy, an England goal. I think football can be snappier and more unexpected, and it can lead to great outbursts. And I'm really sorry, it wasn't on purpose, but I have picked England beating Wales at Euro 2016 at the goal reaction.
No, that's fine. I mean, it's not my sport. I'm not going to get emotionally invested in the clip too much. I did get involved in it. But yeah, no, I do think that people in England in general, and some other countries, do get more passionate about football than they do about rugby. But I think that's more of a cultural thing than the sport itself. Because the reason football is so big is because anyone can play it in any number. 3 people can go for a kickabout. 2 people can go for penalties. Just take turns. Like, you can't play rugby without even teams. And honestly, you can't play proper rugby without 15 people on each side in set positions. Like, and rugby is just a much more complicated game as well. It's not, anyone can go for a kickabout, but you kind of need to understand rugby to play it, which I think creates a higher barrier to entry. Not only that, you can only play rugby on a soft surface. You can only play it on grass, which rules out any inner city unless you have a place to go play it. Whereas football exploded in popularity in the country during the Industrial Revolution because individual factories used to have teams in cities, and they would all get together at the weekend and represent their factories that they played for. So you could play it on concrete, you could play it on cobblestones, you could play it anywhere, which led to a very organic and explosive growth as the country was increasingly urbanised. So it's just more massively followed for various historical reasons, and therefore is way more established in the UK culture. But I mean, you want to see, like, I'll see if I can find the video of Cardiff when Japan versus South Africa was going. And this was, for me, the greatest sporting moment I've ever witnessed. In the World Cup in 2015, Japan, who were ranked, I believe, 17th, beat South Africa, who were ranked 2nd or 3rd. South Africa, who are known for having the general largest rugby team in sort of mass. Not in terms of player, but just the general mass. They're all massive, right? And Japan, unsurprisingly, not that big. And there was so much heart in the win. There was so much... They played into overtime when they were at a draw. And at any point, they could have just kicked the ball out and got a draw against one of the 3 best teams in the world, and it would have been the greatest achievement of their rugby team in history. one mistake, one turnover, one thing wrong, one penalty, and they would have conceded that. In fact, I don't even think it was going to be a draw. I think they would have lost narrowly, but they could have kicked it. So they kept getting penalties that they could have kicked for the draw that they didn't take. And after about 8 minutes, I think, of just trying and just pure heart, they got over the line and beat South Africa. And I've never, ever been anywhere where everybody, regardless of what team they support, jumped and cheered. Like, it wasn't our team won. It was, holy crap, what an underdog story. It was incredible. There we go. This is Irish fans reacting to a Japanese win. It's just not something you'd ever expect. Like, did anybody except Leicester fans jump up and cheer at a Leicester victory? I think people were kind of like, oh, that's cool. It's a nice change. You know, it's a nice thing. But I don't think anybody would have reacted like the England video you just showed me if it wasn't their own team, would they? But if you watch...
I think a lot of the... No, it's okay. I think a lot of the reactions from when Leicester went through from there were mainly... Sorry, when Leicester won the league was mainly from the non-top 4 teams. But they wouldn't have, like you said...
Yeah, he would just have to...
Exactly. They wouldn't have celebrated with the same amount of vigour that they would have done, say, if it was their own team.
I mean, I celebrated a lot when South Korea put Germany out of the World Cup this year. Like, a lot. And they weren't my team, but...
Well, is that just because you're a Brexit-supporting white-collar Englishman who still has grudges about
No, it's just that, as Gary Lineker said, football is a game of 90 minutes, and at the end, the Germans win. And that's what I've been taught all my life. But for once, they didn't win, and it was incredible to see them go out at such an early stage. That might be quite like a bad reason to support them, but if you're talking about underdogs and stuff like that, it's...
But Germany don't always win. I mean, like Brazil, Portugal, Spain, these are the teams I think of when I think of top football teams, not Germany.
I think it's because we have history with Germany, though. We have a particular rivalry. And that's, and I mean in a sporting way, not just the you know, alluding back to World War II.
Yeah. Like, Germany are not to football what New Zealand are to rugby by any measure.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's just that they are always... In fantasy, when you're putting your fantasy football team together, everybody said, oh, Germany always get to the semi-finals. Germany are the team you can bank on, are the reliable ones to get through. And to have that sort of shock, to see that implosion that was almost English in its style was a relief. was quite a sight to behold.
So, you know, there's the Six Nations going on right now. England are thoroughly dominating at this point in time. Wales are on the longest active winning streak in Welsh history, but are playing terribly. It's really weird. Ireland are currently the second best team in the world by a mile, but then just randomly got dismantled by an English side that has been underperforming for 2 years and is now apparently a monster overnight. Scotland are playing better than they have done in years. France are France.
Mercurial.
Yeah. And well, it's an old saying, is it? You never know which French side's going to turn up. And then you've got Italy, who once again are actually playing better than they've ever played. They are getting better year on year, even if they always come last. So it's a great tournament. The Six Nations is incredible. People who don't watch rugby tend to watch the Six Nations. They recently discussed putting it behind a paywall, you know, putting it on a subscription-based service. And the committee behind the Six Nations ruled out ever doing it on the basis that it's too important for rugby that the Six Nations is free to watch, because it attracts so many people outside of the core fan base. It's what gets people watching rugby. World Cup is this year in Japan, which is great after the Japanese performance at last World Cup against South Africa, and I really hope they do well. I really hope Wales... I really hope all the home nations do well. I would like to see England do well, but not win. Like, my dream World Cup final is a Wales versus England final, but Wales. You know, that would be the perfect scenario for me. I would love to see England make it to the final, but not at the expense of Wales.
I don't think you would ever shut up if you beat us in a World Cup final. I can't imagine a world in which every Welshman I meet doesn't mention in passing that they beat us in a World Cup final in that scenario.
Well, being fair, as a Welshman, every time you bring up any sort of rugby result, even if it's in the Six Nations, but you know, it's a great delight for the Welsh to beat the English even in the Six Nations, and the English reaction is always, well, have you won the World Cup? So I will settle for winning a World Cup just so we can say this.
That's fair enough.
There is, we've touched on it briefly, American football, or as it's labelled here, barbecue hand egg. And only one of us, I think, knows a great deal about barbecue hand egg. So, do you prefer your barbecue hand egg Carolina style, Louisiana style, or Texas style?
Most certainly any style that it would come through, to be honest. Personally, the reason why I prefer barbecue hand egg is that just like actual barbecue, there are many different styles that you can actually enjoy it with. And personally, although obviously the NFL is seen as the pinnacle, the biggest shower of this is within the college football ranks. For those that aren't too sure, the way that you get players in the NFL is by either trading them with other teams or signing people as a free agent when the contracts run out, or by having a wonderful thing called the NFL draft every year where you take...
And I love this system, and I would like to see it in other sports like football and
I mean, the fact that you can... There is a reason for attending university for sports aspects, and then although 99% of them will just get, a cheaper education or a free education in some instincts, the fact that you then got an opportunity to go play in one of the top sporting leagues across the world, even though it is only based in North America, they don't, because it's not baseball. It's superb, and it's an owl, which is always great. But it's it's having that, particularly at the college level. I mean, you watch the NFL, and a lot of teams will do very similar things. There is sprinklings here and there of different systems that people will play and different ways that people can play the game. But if you really want to kind of have a look at there was mention earlier on of tactics and watching things from a tactical aspect, whether it be football or whether it be rugby, I think
NFL is the sport.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned having a chess game with soccer ball. I think I've always called, and have done for a number of years, American football is basically aggressive chess. The fact that you've got the tactical aspects that are just more tactical than what you have with soccer, but then also you've got the aggressive aspect that you will find in rugby, but because of the pads that are worn, it goes beyond being a contact sport, and it's always been, to me, a collision sport. Because of the padding that's there, people can be that extra little bit aggressive. Which, has its health problems, as I've, had personally myself. But at the same point, it's a matter of being able to play the game in any way that you want, and just simply thinking to yourself, right, all I need to do is move this ball 10 yards across the next 4 attempts. Otherwise, I give the ball over. And I can do that by throwing it through the air and launching it 90 yards forward and scoring touchdowns. Or I can just run the ball up the middle until you stop me and just gain 3 yards every try.
Is it an actual requirement that everybody except for the quarterback is an idiot and the quarterback needs to have a brain?
It's generally seen that way because he has to, you're talking about guys that have to make decisions across quite a wide, 53-yard wide field in the space of 2.5 seconds. And they have to be able to see and read exactly what's going on. But it's not only within that particular play, it's the quarterback is generally the person that will work very closely with the offensive coordinators and coaches to game plan for teams to make sure that they're on that same side and on the same page, and know what to look for in opposing defenses. And even on the defensive side, you'll have the defensive leaders that will study the offensive film before games, that will know where the talented players are, know who to mark a little bit closer. And it's the amount of work that I've put in, particularly personally as a coordinator over the last couple of years, has been absolutely phenomenal. It's pretty much a second job. And I'm just doing it at an amateur level, and only seeing players twice a week. Whereas, having that contact that you would have, whether it be through college, whether it be through NFL, where you're training 3 to 5 days a week, depending on when your game is, and being able to prepare in such a short space of time, means that you've got to have that smart mentality, particularly at quarterback and a couple of the defensive leaders, because it's not always expected for everyone to be able to do it. I mean, the best thing you can do is, as long as you do your job right as an individual, then the team will go together. If you mess up, then it will hurt the team in some way, and that's going to make yourselves look bad anyway.
It's an incredibly in-depth tactical game where the number of plays are listed. Because it's more stop and start than rugby, as we've touched on, partially due to the culture of trying to sell you everything during every break. I'm pretty sure the number of breaks in NFL is basically just dictated so that they can fit more adverts in.
Well, they do. I mean, if you do go and watch games live of the NFL or even college ball, you will have commercial timeouts, which is literally where the refs will go, right, there's a break in play, we've had a buzz from ABC or CBS, whoever's doing it, and we're going to commercial. Which does elongate the game out a little bit, but at the same point, if you play it, then without those commercials, it's over in half the time, which is a bit frustrating sometimes.
What, that you're spending a lot of time not watching the game, or not watching the game?
In that aspect, yeah. I mean, if you go and see it live, you still get a lot of atmosphere, and
I mean, that's why they have cheerleaders and halftime shows and stuff as well, isn't it? It's to keep the crowd hot whilst they play.
Exactly. I mean,
for the audience.
The halftime show itself is mainly kind of like a Super Bowl aspect. You will get things going on during the halftime in the same way that you'll have, crossbar challenges at football. There's always something going on at halftime. But I suppose with American football, it does kind of lend itself in the way that it is very commercialized because America. It is there, and there is the opportunity with so many people watching TV that you're going to sell space to advertise because it's you're printing money no matter how much you're spending on these adverts.
But I do think that the adverts, in some ways, or the breaks, perhaps caused by the adverts, do lend themselves to increasing the tactical element of the game in a way, because it creates periods where the coach or the quarterback or whoever can liaise with the team and say, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. Whereas in more fluid games like football or rugby, where they don't have as many breaks in play, they sort of have to make those decisions on the fly and use their best judgment and training instead of being able to actually have periods where they can discuss them.
Yeah, and I mean, you look...
So it does enable them to pull off more complex strategies or to switch strategies in a more organised fashion than simply trying to adapt on them.
Exactly. I mean, the best way of looking at it when you look at the more fluid sports like soccer and like rugby is that, for 80% of the time, the game is more fluid, whether you're going through different phases at rugby or whether you're passing the ball about at football. The bit that's coached within American football is to look at the aspect of, oh, hang on a minute, think about having a corner every single play and you're repeating different corner tactics. I'll think of having a line out, or think of having a scrum, having that breakdown in play where there's so many different tactics that you
American
can do.
Football is a set piece.
Exactly.
Play,
yeah, that's the best way of thinking about it, really.
Whereas rugby's broken down into set piece play
and then long phase, or multiple phases as it is.
And football is almost entirely long phase with the occasional set piece triggered.
Exactly, whether it be a corner or a free kick or a throw in some cases. Like the amount of planning that would go into, say, corner routines will be, say, for one training session in the week. Whereas with American football, you'll spend, some time as a positional group dealing with how, like, your technique and how you're going to play in your position, whereas at least half of the time is spent, right, this is what we're doing tactically.
So I do have a question, as you're a coach
Yes.
for it. Why is there not a standardised tackling method?
Because there's different ways in playing the game, in the same way that there's not a standard way of playing offense.
Right. So are you familiar with Seattle Seahawks?
Yes.
Are you familiar with their moniker, the Legion of Boom?
Yes.
Right. So they've got this through having the best defensive stats in the league by a mile. They're about a mid-card team, I believe.
It was a few
mid-table
years ago that this was there, but it was when they were pushing towards the top tier. And they had a group of 5 defensive backs as the position that play almost as, think of it as kind of like your wingers and fullback and centres. So the more athletic team, the more athletic players that would cover the more athletic players, but also be really physical in the way that they played.
Yeah. So I saw a documentary on it where they had a, I think it was an English rugby coach visiting, and they developed a new tackling method in an attempt to reduce concussions, because concussions being a real hot topic in both American football and rugby. And they were like, oh, we hear concussions are a problem in rugby as well. We want you to come and check out our new tackling method. And then they performed a standard rugby tackle, and he looked at them and went, we've been doing that for 100 years. You could have asked us, you idiots. But the simple change in tackling method of aiming for centre of mass, then driving through lifting and driving down with your momentum, they found that it just massively increased their defensive statistics to just simply tackle properly instead of slamming into people and hoping their guy was big.
I mean, I think the difference is within that is that, because having played rugby as well when I was younger, it was all about, hitting around the thighs and then driving. And that's where a lot of the difference would be, because if you do just try to drive around thigh level in American football, what you'll tend to find is that people will bounce off if you don't get anyone else around. A lot of ways, if you watch some of their highlights as they go through from that particular year, they will do what's ended up being called a hawk roll tackle, and it's the way that the majority of teams are taught, even though across even the American football coaching in the US, it's taught to be a roll tackle, which is something similar to the clip that I've posted on there. And it'll give kind of the idea of not necessarily bringing people to the ground, but slowing them down enough that you're able to get the swarm of a defence, 2 or 3 guys there on that tackle. Because
that's a rugby tackle.
Yeah, I mean, the difference is that it gives you that particular aspect, and adding the roll in there as well, making sure that the head's out of the way, it does show massive similarities in rugby. And it's why...
Yeah, because you move the head to the side in order to avoid smashing your head into their knee and avoid a concussion on your part.
Exactly, whereas our concussions wouldn't happen with heads to the knee. They tend to happen with helmet to helmets, or sometimes helmet to chest areas. You know,
but I mean, there isn't a standardized tackling method across American football. Is there is a lot of people just using bulk and using speed and just smashing.
It is. I mean, the way that from a coaching aspect, if you go through the qualifications, whether it's based in the UK, or even if it's based in the US now with the American coaching qualifications, which I've done both. It does point you towards the roll tackle and keeping the head out of the way. But it does still include not necessarily what we used to call a form tackle, but which would need you to have more bulk, but also better technique, than the guy you're coming up against if he is bulkier than you. But it's not always as easy to perform the roll tackle in certain game situations. For instance, if you've got a running back that's running straight at you, he's not just going to run as upright as he would do in rugby. What you'll tend to find with some games is that they'll run with pretty much their whole weight forward, to absorb that impact and to fall forward to gain those extra few yards. And when you've got a guy whose helmet is at your waist and legs are 2 or 3 yards behind him, it's going to be difficult in order to make that particular play.
And that's because yardage is more important than possession.
Exactly, yeah. You still have a territory game, as you do in rugby union. Like, obviously, starting your drive at your own 5-yard line is not as good as starting the drive at your own 45-yard line, because you're going to have less space to score, or more. It's always beneficial to have less space to go. But having where your positioning is always going to be a lot more important with American football.
So, as a rugby fan, what terrifies me about the NFL is the sheer size of it. There's so many players that go into the system, into college football. It's such a big thing with such a big player base. That rugby is now the fastest growing sport in America and has been for a number of years.
And they're actually doing pretty well because at the 7 series at the minute.
Yeah, because there's a lot of people who don't make it as American football players. A lot of people. And there's a lot of good athletes who don't make it. And increasingly, they're looking around and going, well, what else can I do with my career if I still want to take part in sports? And they look at rugby and go, this seems like a similar skill set. And it's growing and growing and growing. And that's great for the sport, to have another competitive team up and coming. But the amount of money America has and the amount of players America has to choose from, if enough people in America start getting interested in rugby, they could become a real scary team. They just need the infrastructure. And they've last year introduced their first domestic rugby league.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's the same. The same could be said really if you look at the MLS. Like, the amount of money that they could be able to throw at it means that within the MLS that they should be, club-wise or even national team-wise, be able to have that, be able to be that world-dominating power. I think if they run it like they run the rest of their sports, and make sure that it's incorporating the college game, what you'll tend to find is not necessarily, football players American football players that haven't been able to make it in the pro leagues going playing rugby. What you'll tend to find is that, even within colleges, they're starting to play sevens. It's not on the same scale as what you play in American football games.
The fastest rugby player in the world is an American who used to be an Olympic sprinter and decided to start playing rugby as a winger.
But within their club system, if they run their club systems like they do their other sports, you'll find that colleges will start taking it up a little bit more and investing a little bit more, and then they'll bring the players in through from their colleges.
I watch a lot of Americans reacting to rugby tackle videos because I think they always think it's the same kind of tackling as American football, where it's maybe more reckless and less structured. Because they've got the pads and the helmets, they can be a bit more violent and a bit more reckless with it. And it always amazes me how Americans seem to think that rugby players are all basically psychopaths because they're not wearing pads.
But I think
it's just
from the injury aspects as well, I know I said before about the collisions and things like that. I mean, I think from playing rugby when I was younger, there was a lot more kind of joint aspects and things that would hurt. Like, your shoulders
Oh yeah, there's a lot. The most common injuries are ligament and tendon damage or fractures to the collarbones.
Shoulders and knees would hurt, but it's a different sort of, because with American football, it's a lot of kind of like the bench press aspect. So it's kind of your chest and your shoulders will ache, but it's not through contact as much. But with exactly, I mean, I did see through playing, which was a similar amount of time in my playing career. A lot more serious injuries with American football than I saw with rugby. And I don't know whether that was to do with the violence of the sport or to do with the fact that there was obviously a lot more not qualified, I'm trying to think, a lot more experience within the coaching aspects and a lot more experience from people having played it, whether it just be having, picked up in a park, playing a pickup game. Whereas with American football, particularly here, there's a lot more deals with concussions. I saw broken legs. I personally had enough concussions to make me stop playing. There's a lot more kind of like high impact.
Do you think that's down to the infrastructure here, though? Do you think it's a lack of adequate training and experience? Do you think maybe you'd get the same rate of injuries in America?
Maybe you could have that argument, say in the, kind of in the 80s when it was starting to be played over here. Or mainly probably the early 90s, once the big, because there was once a paid league in the UK that fell by the wayside, even was sponsored by Budweiser at one point. But once that fell by the wayside and it went completely amateur, and it had more English players rather than people being imported from the US to play, there was probably a time where it was probably down to the coaching. And I think a lot of the injuries and the mentalities from the different tackling systems as such is that because the game has evolved in a certain way to try and avoid these injuries, you'll find that there's a lot less injuries nowadays outside of, people doing something incorrectly or not doing things by the technique that you're doing them, because the coaches are getting smarter. The coaches that have been taught a reckless abandon of doing things, the one that want to adapt and continue coaching in the sport, will learn these different techniques in order to make sure that they're safer, that their players are safer, rather than going to some of the things that you did when you were going through. And it's probably why a lot of the assistant coaches, particularly in the US, will tend to be more recent graduates, and you'll see that a lot of the positional aspects and the way that people will learn things will come from a newer way of thinking rather than thinking that the old way is the best, which obviously isn't always the greatest way of thinking about it.
One question I wondered, since you're doing coaching in the UK, how popular does America, because to me, it's only an American thing. I know that people must play it here, presumably, but I have no idea of how popular it is. Is it? Are you doing this in schools? Are you doing this with people who just want to pick it up in their spare time? I have no idea, basically.
So I've been involved since 2004. Was when I was first introduced to American football in the UK. Now it has grown a hell of a lot since then, in the facts of just general amounts of players that are there, number of different teams, the fact that the university system is tiered and part of the book system as well now. It shows that there's been that particular progression. Now, from my personal experience over the last 5 years is going to be a hell of a lot different to the majority of coaches at different levels. The team that I coach is one of the top four in the UK, with the Manchester Titans, having been promoted to the top league last year, making it through to be there as the second best team in the North Division, is something that we take as a club quite proudly. And we've got a team that plays in every single facet of American football at the minute in the UK. And that's not just, with me coaching for, anyone that's over the age of 18 that just wants to pick it up and give it a go. We've also got adult flag teams, which is a five-a-side version based on a smaller pitch where you have flags as you're using it, and it's a non-contact sport. There's a women's contact team. There's a women's flag team. There's we have an under-19s team. We have 3 under-17s teams now, as well as actually over the last 2 or 3 years, going into schools and having under-12 cadet flag teams come to us and train from there, but also having coaches going to schools and not only teaching the kids, but also, educating the teachers that want to try and give the flag football a go as to how to teach it and to how to work through the proper technique. We've just announced over the last couple of weeks, I believe, a partnership with not with the Jacksonville Jaguars, but with a part of the Jacksonville Jaguars that are over here in the UK.
I didn't know you worked for All Elite Wrestling.
Unfortunately, I do. And it's that, I just wish I got the contracts that they got. I think with, I think it's with, is it like Jag Flag? I think it is. So the Jaguars have been coming over for quite a while, and running a sevens tournament, so 7-a-side flag tournament. And they've partnered with the Titans because of the amount of work that we're doing around the Manchester area. When it comes to going into schools.
They want more people interested in their sport all around.
Exactly. And I'm just trying to find a link as I'm going through it. And it just...
Do you think the fact that it's called American football puts anyone off when you're trying to recruit people? Like, when you're at the universities and you're like, join the American Football Society, do you think too many people go, America?
I think it probably was the case when I first joined. Not so much now because of the amount of exposure that it's getting with the games that are over here in the UK.
I mean, Super Bowl's becoming a bigger thing in the UK.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, there's...
Who won this year, by the way? I believe the American national team's called the Patriots.
Indeed, yeah, the New England Patriots. So England won again.
Oh, did they win again?
It wasn't the greatest spectacle if you only watch the Super Bowl every year. I would apologise for that because usually people like high-scoring games. However, this was a low-scoring game, and I absolutely thoroughly enjoyed watching it because I'm a defensive guy. It was just two different ways of looking at the game, as we said before, and it was two very, very good defences playing against each other.
Yeah, I mean, as a Wales fan, I'm a huge, huge fan of good defence in rugby because Wales are statistically the strongest defence in the world. As a team, they're just good at it. They've not been the most prolific try scorers for the last 6-7 years now, but they are a defensive masterclass. So I can appreciate why you would appreciate that with
exactly. So
how would people go about getting involved in American football if they're interested in the UK in joining, trying?
Wherever you're based, there's a team across England, Wales, and in Scotland. The best thing to do would be to find out where your local team is. Head over to Double Coverage, which is dblcoverage.com. They have a map that's basically there to find your local team. And it will give you an idea as to where to get in contact. A lot of the seasons tend to run over the summer. So our pre-season only started last month.
There's only time for one season in summer. Summer is the season. I'm not sure you understand how a calendar works.
Now, unfortunately, should I say, our 1 week of summer seems to last on every Sunday when we're playing. So you do get tans in very strange places due to the kit that you have to wear. But yeah, it is a lot of fun. If you are going to university, get yourself along to one of the sports society fairs. The majority of universities now will have American football programs, and there's a lot of money being put into those now, just because of the fact that
get a scholarship though. It's an American sport, not an American university.
They're about that. I'll touch on that in a second. So with the obviously universities, you can still go up and play. A lot of universities now, because of the fact that there's books points connected to it, and that usually means that more people will want to come to your university. There's more points being put into American football each year. The top teams are the top universities are starting to have money involved in order to bring imported players from the US. So, for instance, the University of Nottingham is one that I know. Some of their staff that they have with them will have, that I know that I used to play with, will go over to the US to high schools that, and speak to players that aren't necessarily having, the top Division 1 contracts to offer them scholarships to come over and play in the UK.
I find that really depressing. I'm not a fan of giving people academic luxury based on athletic ability.
It's giving them an opportunity to get an education when they may not have been able to afford it in the first place. It's not a fully paid scholarship.
Yeah, but when there's a limited number of university places, I do personally believe that those places should be going to academic students, not to athletic students.
At the end of the day, they still have to pass their academics in the same way that an academic student would do. They wouldn't be able to go and take a D grade student, and not just because they play football real good, they won't be able to bring those over. They're strict.
Everyone should just do the Jamie Roberts path. Be a professional rugby player and a doctor.
They are very strict, even in the US, of making sure that their student athletes are exactly that. They are students first, and they need to meet a minimum grade, even when they're at high school or when they're at the college itself, in order to have that scholarship. It's not seen as you have a scholarship, therefore you're fine. You have to meet minimum grade boundaries in order to keep your scholarship.
It's just a very odd system to someone who's not been over there or participated in it. They're two completely separate skills that are unrelated.
But when you have both of them, and if you were to just go on an academic level to a college in the US, and you can be paying upwards of $15,000 to $20,000 a year.
Oh no, I don't begrudge the players taking it. They should definitely take it if it's the opportunity given. I just don't understand why it's given.
It's just having that aspect because there's money involved in it. Where there's money that's being made, then money has to be given out.
But is there money in the UK teams? Like, do UK universities tend to make profits from their sports teams and their sports events? I don't think they do. If
people wish to go to university, and one of the aspects that they will look at, say if they're a top rugby player in the UK youth system that doesn't want to just go and play, they will look for a university with the sports aspect. If you've been brought up in a particular area, say for instance the under-19s team with American football, one of the things that we encourage players to do is to get involved with university football. And if they're thinking of going to university, to look for universities that have American football setups. And it gives them the opportunity to play alongside, because the university season will obviously run when term time's on. That during the summer, it gives them the opportunity to play during the winter and come back in the summer to a team and have an extra season worth of playing and have that extra season worth of experience.
So, Rob, what do you think about mixing academics and athletics in such a way and giving people maybe academic opportunities based on athletic abilities?
I think it's a great idea. I think that a lot of the time sportsmen, particularly within football or sports where the reward is potentially very high, that there's pressure on them to put aside their academic pursuits in favour of the athletic ones. So having those tied together and being made sure that you can become an American football star, but you do also have to, pass your grades. You do have to be able to do something else with your life if something goes wrong. Sports careers are usually very short and not everyone can make it. So I do think that it's a good idea to have that backup of an academic background alongside the more athletic pursuits.
Okay, that's a different angle and one that makes perfect sense.
It's interesting. There's been a series recently on Freakonomics, which is a very good podcast about economics. And they've been talking about sports and how, the economics behind how sports work in the US, which is very interesting because it's very different to how our leagues over here work.
There's a lot more money in it, except for the Premier League, because the Premier League is international and I think is the most watched sport in the world simply because it's so international.
Yeah, I think that is true. One of the things they had an interview with an American footballer who I can't remember now, but he was talking about how he went off, he quit American football to go do his PhD in mathematics. And then, now he would, if his son really wants to do American football, that's fine, but he would, really recommend that he doesn't do it because of the injuries and stuff like that. So there's an interplay there between, especially with these sports that are collision sports involving the head, where there is a possibility of brain injury. Then there is this kind of interplay between what comes first,
long-term damage and short-term gain.
And the other thing that's interesting is how all these players get paid a lot of money, right? And they have all these endorsements, but actually many players aren't very good at planning for their financial future. So a big thing they do, I think, now in the US is they set them up with accountants and stuff who can be like, look, I know you've got a lot of money, but if you spend it all now, you've got 10 years of play maybe, and then you've got 30, 40 years after that.
You know who else is going out with a lot of money? Those accountants.
Oh yeah, I'm sure they will, and they'll know how to deal with it.
Coming off the back of that financially aspect as well, within the NFL, I think they say the average NFL career is 2.5 years. It's very rare that you'll make a long career out of it. But as part of the process of entering the league from college, as well as setting them up with accountants, they'll actually have, a rookie week that the NFL will run that will teach them how to look after their finances, to tell them that they're not going to be playing this game in 14, 15 years' time, to make sure that the amount of money that they're earning, even though it might not be the most for the person that's playing in that sport, is a good amount of money that you'll be able to live on for the rest of your life. and will...
And it's invested wisely
Exactly,
as well.
it's invested wisely. It's, you're not forgetting about your education as well to go back. It's always that 1% that will be able to make it to the NFL. The rest of them will just make sure that they've got a bachelor's degree out of it. And in some instances...
We discussed this previously on an esports episode as well, with very short careers, very high earnings, but then people have to be set up for what they do after that. What kind of other sports are there, Tom?
Yeah, I've slightly reordered our list here, which will cut me talking about that. I think maybe we should go over to another bit of Rob's forte here with balls with bats, and I think we're talking about a very genteel version of balls with bats. We're not talking baseball here. I think we're talking something that might take about 5 days to play. Isn't that right, Rob?
Yes, Tom, that's entirely right. Cricket is one of my favourite secret pleasures.
I thought we were going down a different path. Bit more leather.
The sound of willow on leather is a wonderful thing. But yeah, no, I wanted to try and explain cricket a bit, because I know that it's a very...
Yeah, please do.
Okay, so imagine how
American
great,
listeners, get ready.
I'm just going to give you my opinion on cricket in 2 sentences. It's a long picnic with some people occasionally getting...
And lots of drink.
I mean, yeah, and what's wrong with that would be my response. So, how good is sport, right? It's amazing over 90 minutes or 2 hours, but imagine that over 5 days, right? It's so you get so much time to just switch off from the world and let the sport just wash over you.
And you complain that you can look away from rugby for 5 minutes.
Yeah, but it's not about that. It's a different pace of the game. It's the only sport that has meal breaks. You're feeling a bit peckish? Don't worry. In a few hours, you get to stop, and the players get to stop as well. It's a wonderful thing. It's my relaxation technique, I think. If
a movie is great when it's 2 hours, 2.5 hours, yeah. But I'm not going to sit and watch an 8-hour movie.
Correct, but you'll watch Lord of the Rings back to back is 12 hours, right? And that's a great...
Yeah, but that's because I'm a massive nerd. That's not normal.
I'm a massive nerd for cricket. You see, it's just the story ebbs and flows. You've got 2 innings for each side. You've got one team can be on top, and then the other one swings back slowly. You can have periods...
Mate, I've fallen asleep just listening to you all that. That's how boring cricket is.
I understand it's a niche thing, and it's an entirely different pace to every different sport that we've talked about so far. But I really enjoy the mental battle, the kind of the war of attrition that there is, even for you as a spectator watching it.
Whichever team runs out of Pro Plus first.
Exactly. It's wonderful. You can watch, an hour of a bowler really be on top of a batsman and just beating the edge of the bat and thinking, oh, is he going to go out? Is he not? You can have fantastic periods of play. And a game that can turn on a dime so quickly. You can go from watching a team...
Nothing changes quickly in a game that takes 5 days,
no,
Robert.
But it can, okay? So what you're thinking about cricket is you're thinking just a batsman just out there for 2 hours just accumulating 50 runs and not much happening. But you could, theoretically, lose a game of cricket within 10 balls, right? Okay, there was... a game in the Ashes in 2015, I think, and it's a morning that I will never forget at work. Australia were into bat and England took a wicket, and I was like, oh, that's great. Oh, that's a good start. And then 2 balls later, we took another wicket, and we just kept on taking wickets through the morning until, in about under 100 balls, Australia were all out. The best cricket team in the world, and we just thrashed them. And when that happens, it's an amazing feeling. I know that it sounds bizarre that it's, we're all just celebrating that something's finally happened in cricket.
Yeah, if you spot it among the 8 hours of shit not happening.
But you get the payoff. You get, for all that time and effort that you've put in, for all that time you've invested in the boring games, you finally get the one where everything happens and it's mad.
See, now all you're doing is reminding me of the time that I watched Trigun, the anime. Right, where I got through the first... It gets really good in the second half, and I was like, thinking about afterwards, I was like, you know what, this show was really, really shit and boring for the first half, but it's really good in the second half, and I thought, well, the first half was 10 hours long, why did I waste 10 hours of my life watching something that shit?
Yeah, no, it's the Breaking Bad of sports, right, okay? The first season of Breaking Bad is bad, but then it gets incredible towards the end, and it's how much time you put into it and what you get out of it, I think, is where cricket is at its strongest.
You're not putting any time into it. You're sat there passively, consuming it in dribs and drabs because it's not keeping you actively riveted. Like a 90-minute sport, you're riveted for 90 minutes, because it's got two halves that are roughly about the span of an average human attention span, right? So you've got a half of attention span, you take a break, you got half attention span, you're riveted, you're excited, you're tense for an amount of time, and then it's cathartic release. Whereas cricket goes on for so long that you can't possibly pay attention to all of it. You're going to miss a whole bunch of shit if anything happens at all. I just, how can it possibly be engaging I've known so many people who are really excited cricket fans. I'm just like, nothing. What?
You need. It's like
I don't even understand the scoring system.
It's like any sport where you need an investment in one side. Okay, you cannot get into it if you're not invested in one side or the other. I find it really hard to watch a friendly game of cricket because it is so slow as a sport.
I watch every Six Nations game by every team.
Yeah, because you find because rugby's a different pace of the game. For cricket.
But I mean, I don't have to be invested in one of those sides. I can watch it for the skill and the athletics.
You're a better person than me because I always, for me, it's always about the narrative. It's always about the story that's being created and the personal rivalries.
You should just ditch. You should just ditch sport completely and watch WWE. Or something.
No, but WWE.
If what you want is a soap opera, just watch something that pretends to be.
That's the problem with WWE is that it's all predetermined elsewhere. It's you can watch a great film, right? But then you go again and you watch it again and you know what's going to happen. In sport, you never know what's going to happen. In cricket, the next bit of excitement could be just around the corner. It could be in 2 hours' time. So why don't I just?
It could be in 3 days.
So why don't I just?
Jesus Christ! Can you imagine, just humour my analogy here, right? To go back to the leather and the bats, you're with your wife.
We're talking about leather again.
She might orgasm in 5 minutes. She might orgasm in 3 days. Who knows?
Okay, right. Let me tell you about Sting and the tantric orgasm and having sex.
She's not
going to
stick around for 3 days.
It can go on for hours, and I think Sting's wife was very pleased with that. And as a fact, Sting's wife was a great fan of Test cricket as well. So I think those two things overlap perfectly. Yeah.
Now the thing is, though, with cricket as well, the thing that I think piques a lot of people's interest is even the shorter version of the games is getting such great attention. Like, I know rugby has its 7 series, but you won't find, crowds of 20, 30,000 people watching 7s with the same figure that you would do watching the IPL or the Big Bash League.
There is no vigour in cricket. There are people there, but nobody has vigour. Vigour is not a word that is applicable.
Watch some of the IPL, watch some of the Indian Premier League games or the Big Bash games, and you'll see a lot of investment and excitement in everything that's going on.
No, I'll have an aneurysm.
It's incredible, and honestly, if you go and see it live, the best thing about 2020 cricket is the fans try to consume the same amount of beer that they would do over a 5-day period in about 3 hours.
They are a lot of fun for that reason.
Yeah, so
I think I have agreed. I can't remember if I've agreed on air, but then this can be me agreeing on air. I think I have agreed to let Rob take me along to a cricket game one day and just see what it's like.
Poor soul.
Make it a 2020 game.
There's gonna be sandwiches. There's gonna be pims. I mean, it's much like tennis, which we're about to get to. Sorry, balls with rackets.
Could you possibly be more of a middle class?
I mean, no, but that's the whole point of going to a cricket game, right?
They call those spin bowlers, I believe.
Have you got like chap hop at half time?
Oh, that'd be great. If they got Mr. B, the gentleman rhymer, just to come on. I think actually a lot of the cricket fans would be a bit bemused, but I'd be up for that. He's quite fun.
Just take your banjolele, it'd be fine.
I just it's like saying that waiting 3 days for the payoff makes it worth it. It's like saying, I've been waiting at this restaurant for my order for 3 days. Like, yeah, I'm gonna be delighted when the food arrives, but it's not gonna stop me being pissed off for 3 days that I'm wasting my time on this shit.
That steak has been aged for 3 days. That's what you've got to think of it. Okay, and when it arrives on
no, it's been left in the cupboard for 3 days, right, at room temperature, and has gone off.
No, it's just aged and matured. It's like a fine wine. You've got to appreciate the skill and effort that's gone into that 3 days.
You know what happens when you leave wine long enough? It becomes vinegar, right? And vinegar goes on salad, which is just shit food.
Mike's on a heavy protein diet at the moment, if you didn't know.
I'm on the worst diet. Like, my personal trainer's got me eating 4 meals a day. It involves eggs, lentils, and toast and fruit salad for breakfast.
Oh, I've missed the fruit
and then
salad.
Chicken and rice for my first meal with a banana, then mince and potatoes, then fish, new potatoes, and salad, right? And at no point is anything not dry as fuck because it's batch cooked, because I don't have time to cook 4 meals a day while I'm at work.
That's fair.
So I've got batch cooked, dry as fuck, bland food that consists of carbohydrates, proteins, and a piece of food. And I'm just like, give me something with fat.
Well, if you're basing your day around meals, may I suggest cricket, a game with meal breaks in it?
To be fair, you could have one before the game, then you've got lunch, you have tea, and then you can have one after the game. Like, you've got
I'm done.
planned out.
Did he quit on purpose there?
Yeah, quite
Was that a
possibly.
rage quit, Mike?
I might have noted down. You know, or I could just watch a rugby game between each meal. Huh?
Yeah, that's fine if you like fast food. If you like quick and easy snacks, that's fine. But I'm talking about the long drawn out roast dinner of a game that is cricket.
Wow.
Well, that does highlight the fact that whilst the roast dinner is quite nice, it is incredibly bland compared to every other cuisine in the fucking world. So you've described cricket perfectly.
No problem.
I don't know, chicken and rice and then fish and new potatoes with a
That's
piece of...
not cuisine. Dave,
It's just energy that goes in at that point.
I get to eat cuisine once a week, okay? I get to eat food once a week. The rest of it is prescribed fuel, and I hate it. It's not food. I'm convinced my personal trainer secretly hates me, himself, and the entire world.
I think we will move on from the contentious contentious topic.
It's as bad as Formula One.
Oh, I like Formula One as well.
Of course you do, you boring.
So do I.
It's because he sat out there in the 18th century. He needs something that's a bit slower paced.
My dad and my sister love Formula One because they're obsessed with cars, and I'm just like, I can only imagine how awful it would be to watch live.
You're missing the point here. You have to be a massive alcoholic to enjoy these sports because they last so long.
Oh, right, no, okay, no, you're getting to the bottom of it. Nobody enjoys these sports. They have to drink copious amounts just to get
No,
food.
it's just an excuse to drink.
Precisely.
Like, you're gonna get frowned upon if you turn up at the pub at 9 o'clock and don't leave till 5. But if you
I thought we just called that being British.
If you turn up at a cricket match, it's all okay because you're at a sporting event.
It's entirely
Cunning
right.
loophole.
It's so... oh my god, I just can't even get my head around how boring it is.
Hi, Tom here. This is one big bumper episode, so I've decided I would just cut it here, and you will get the second part in a week or so when I've got around to editing it. Sorry it's taken so long to edit, and apologies to our guest Dave for the time it's taken to edit here. We're probably going to be looking to do shorter episodes in future with a bit more planning so that I can actually get around to finishing editing them. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and hopefully in the second half they'll convince me to enjoy some Sportsball. Bye.